Welcome to the Monday Night Chat Show. This week I have Chris Cooper. Chris is a very good, interesting person. He's been a friend of mine for 15 years and he runs on VoiceAmerica, the Business Elevation show. Prior to that, Chris was a negotiator, a procurement expert, and ran his own procurement agency where he fell out with a number of people because they had different goals to him. I'll pick up this interview as I ask Chris about why he went off to work for Mars.
I'll always remember, never forget those trucks blocking the entrance and suddenly finding I didn't have a job. And a best friend of mine contacted me and said, Mars are advertising, and I put my name forward. And thankfully for me, I got through the sort of 7 stages. My friend didn't, and I ended up working for Mars, and I progressed through sales and marketing and training, and eventually wanted to get a sense of what happened on the other side, and how did procurement work. And I found myself looking after the marketing services rosters at Mars. So I looked after the buying of sales promotions and sponsorship, and I found myself negotiating pantomimes with Milky Way magic stars and negotiating the deals around a massive promotion around celebrations when it launched, for a big train that went around the country with lots of celebrities on it and people getting married and things like that, and design agencies and things like negotiations with Comic Relief. And then I went on to United Biscuits and ran that kind of a function, developed it from just myself to having teams in France and Belgium, Holland, Spain, Finland, Poland, and then taking responsibility for ingredients procurement for 15 factories. So I was the biggest, most significant buyer of white powder in Europe. It was actually biscuit flour, nothing, about over 100,000 tons a year of biscuit and cake flour and masa flour for tortilla chips and all that sort of thing.
And when you're working in procurement, what's the 3 key issues really that you've got to look at? Because it is quite different to just raw negotiating, isn't it?
Oh gosh. I think probably you've got to be very mindful, obviously, of what's going on in the market. I mean, if you're buying something like flour, a difference of £1 made on the price made, I can't remember what I think it was, maybe like nearly £1 million, on a pound of flour. So you had to really, really understand the dynamics of what was going on in the market. So I think with those sorts of roles, you've got to have your ear to the ground, I think is really important, and follow those marketplaces. So we would develop little strategies by each of the different areas that we operated in. I think relationships is really important. I think that's one of the things I particularly enjoyed, was getting to know different people, different suppliers, and be able to negotiate well. I found myself, certainly when I had my own consultancy, involved in some big negotiations on some massive spends, and that relationship, I think, was something I didn't realize till afterwards I was quite good at, being able to be likable, but also to kind of understand the detail. I think the other thing was interesting was culture. I found it fascinating when buying internationally, how different suppliers expected to buy from you. There was muggins here would turn up to negotiate a flour contract with a flour miller in France, and I'd have lots of time. It was one of a number of big negotiations. I'd be doing a little tour, and all the flour miller wanted to do was take me out for lunch and get me drunk, basically. And then the second time you went, they might want to do a bit of that, but take you through the market. And on the third time, that's when you negotiated price. And that was quite hard as a Brit who was short of time, speeding up that process without destroying the relationship. So I suppose being aware internationally, and then when you were running international teams of buyers, understanding their cultural differences and the way they operated, and how it was different to you, and had some advantages sometimes. I'd go and sit on people's desks like the MD in France, and all of the French team was scared stiff of him. I'd just walk in his office and have a chat. I didn't know any different, and that he liked that actually. So yeah, probably understand the market, relationships, and be very mindful around around culture and how far you can push it, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what made you leave a nice steady job with well paid, I assume, to go out on your own, to open up your own procurement consultancy? I think it was procurement to start off with, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was I suppose I then moved on to Punch, actually, taverns, which are 5,500 pubs and restaurants. So I looked after the procurement of services for all of the pubs and restaurants across the group, and I took over as logistics director for the company too. But there was a bit of I mean, why I left United Biscuits was sort of office politics, really. The procurement director I got on with so well, he went to Punch, took me along with him, and then at Punch, we were supporting two businesses, Punch and Spirit, and we were very successful. We were in the middle, but the two cultures didn't really. They rubbed against each other, and we were this successful bit in the middle. And we tried to persuade them that we could go away. We got the best price in the market because we had the biggest volumes. We got lots of deals with Guinness and Coke, and we knew all of the the bottom price in the marketplace and had that knowledge. And we tried to persuade them that we could create this agency that operated for other companies. They could make some money. They didn't bite, so we all managed to engineer a redundancy, and we set up a procurement consultancy. And I guess with our experience, within 3 years, we grew that to about £3 million of turnover, 25 staff. But yeah, I hit an interesting time. I was never at home. I was traveling all the time. I was married. I got my first child. I could see myself getting divorced if I wasn't careful. And there was a life balance sort of situation for me and decision. And also I was rubbing with myself, and one of the co-directors was ex-Sandhurst military, very finger pointy, would promise £10 million of cost reduction and expect Muggins and his team here to go and deliver it. And we got to a point where I thought, actually, I'm gonna leave. I sold my share. One of my colleagues did too, and set up on my own. I'm actually doing more people development and leadership development, which are my passion, because I love working with teams really, and people. So that's what I've done for 15 years, and help companies grow through their people. Sometimes procurement. I've worked with Diageo on procurement and helped them develop online procurement content, which won a national award, international award, which was lovely. Sometimes I dip into that arena, but it's a bit more around elevating business as a whole these days, small to large.
Let's wind the tape back just for a few minutes. So you must have had some really tough negotiations, exiting a partnership of a number of people, particularly probably when they didn't want to lose you, but you were doing it for family reasons, which is the best reasons of the whole lot. Yeah.
Well, it was health too. I'd had a major surgery, which I knew I needed to have before my son was born. First son was born, and I did that, and it was like an express train. I was told to take 6 weeks off, and the team wanted me to take 2. And when I got back after 2, I could barely stand up. I really needed more time, and so there was a little collision of that, and just reflecting about what was life really like, and my own purpose in life, and the contribution I wanted to make to the world really. And I started to dream of pastures new. So yeah, there was a negotiation involved. It was probably, if I look back on it, and you described it in the intro. The intro is the copy is acrimonious. I did have to take some legal advice, and I think I handled the negotiation in a way that I'm still very proud of, even though it was quite stressful at the time. Actually, it got a little bit unpleasant the other way. I think I handled it very calmly, and I took advice and did it systematically. But if I had to gain some reward out of the effort that I put in, really. So it wasn't easy, but we got through it, and I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, well done. Those conflict negotiations are really tricky, aren't they? People totally underestimate how difficult they can be, how sleepless nights are caused, etc. And I often recommend to people, that the shortest way is sometimes the best way. I think that's called Occam's razor, isn't it? If you Google it, the shortest way is the fastest one. We live quite near Ockham in Surrey, and he was a nasty bit of work, but he left Occam's razor on the radar. Chris, let's talk now. I'm very interested in the Voice of America Business Elevation Show. Now, you've been doing that for 9 years, and I know it costs you money. I know you got a lot of business from it, but it's a very interesting model. Can you share some of it with us?
Yeah, and it's actually Voice America, so it's
Voice America. I always get it wrong.
You always get it wrong. Never mind. It's always there's a difference between the two. One's a kind of commercial, international show that people listen to when they're traveling. This one is an online. Voice America describes themselves as a leading online radio platform. So my show is a little different to a podcast in the fact that it does actually go live, and it's aired live across the internet as it's recorded. It's an hour every Friday, and I've done this since September 2011, interviewing thought leaders and experts from around the world. And it came about because at the age of 40, I'd set some quite ridiculous goals, I thought, when I was 28 and had just bought a flat in London and was pretty broke. And my girlfriend had just left me. It was a bit of a low point. And I decided to write down on a bit of paper what life would be like when I'm 40, because I could never imagine never being that old. So I could be ridiculous. So I wrote all these things down, never expecting them to happen. But on my 40th, I was there outside the house I'd imagined. I got some financial freedom. I got my own company. I wanted to play rock guitar to my friends and impress them. So I played the guitar to them. And the only thing that hadn't arrived was a dog, who arrived 3 weeks later. So I set some new goals. So I set a goal that I wanted to add value to over 1 million people beyond my client base, and it was really it was a giving back thing initially, and the fact I love communicating, and it come out of enjoying organizing sessions like this and inviting people along, and like you, I started interviewing people, and I thought, how could I take that a little bit further? So the show, it's weekly. I have a contract with Voice America. They approached me. I was very flattered, and then I realized I had to pay them, so it wasn't quite so flattering. But the model has enabled me to connect with people and generate friends and connections around the world, and with people who, quite honestly, would have no interest in me otherwise, I would imagine. And some of these people become friends, peers, and you suddenly have this amazing network of talent around the world that you can draw upon, and a lot of people do listen. I think we were the most listened to show out of 50 shows on the business network, a couple of in 2019, accessed over 50 countries every month, so we must be doing something right, I guess, really. And we aim to provide content that helps people to elevate their thinking and to improve their businesses. But for me, it's about also underpinned by doing business for good. You know, we've got problems in this world at the moment with the most intelligent species on the planet, but yet, you know, what we see right now is a result of our thinking and a result of that intelligence. And what we need is more wisdom. So I'm hoping to just share a little bit more wisdom through the show to help people contribute to this bigger picture and improve things.
Brilliant, Chris. So if anyone's watching live or on YouTube or listening to this on my podcast, how do they sign up for Voice America?
Yeah, if you go to voiceamerica.com and then you Google Chris Cooper in there, you'll get to the Business Elevation Show. And in there's an archive with 400 shows in there. They're all available for free. You can listen to them on demand. You can download them. So that's voiceamerica.com. And if you put Chris Cooper in the box, you'll get to my show. It airs every Friday, but you can access all the archive going back to 2011.
Fantastic. Now, you told me that Jack Canfield was probably the most famous person that you interviewed. Chicken Soup for the Soul author, made an absolute fortune, was a school teacher. Yep, that's the book. And how many versions of that are out? Are thousands. How did you get hold of him, and how did you find that interview?
Yeah. I mean, there's been lots of interviews, obviously, over the time. Jack, what I'm always been, and I've always done with people, is when I have connected with a great guest and I've had a good show, I cheekily ask them at that point, you know, is there anybody that you know in your network who you think would be great for the show? And through that, there's been all sorts of surprises. I've interviewed the saxophone player from Dire Straits and all sorts of different people as a result of it. But this came with somebody I'd interviewed. They connected me through with Jack, and I think I interviewed them with Jack too. And he was one of my kind of heroes, really. I was always very impressed with Chicken Soup for the Soul, how he'd been rejected 140 times, him and Mark Victor Hansen, for getting that book published. And they kept going, and the resilience involved. And eventually they underwrote that book themselves and said to the publisher, how many books do we need, a book publisher, how many books do we need to sell? And they said 10,000. Okay, we'll underwrite those if you'll publish. 500 million copies and 120 variations sold since, even part of the Chinese state curriculum, apparently. So Jack, I found fascinating. I'll never forget, actually, I said to him at the beginning of the interview that Jack, actually, I've done a lot of interviews, but I'm a little bit nervous because I've read a lot of your content, and I'll never forget, he said, gee, Chris, don't you worry about that. It's really not a problem. I feel the same way sometimes. And I said, when? He said, when I'm talking to Obama. But one of the things I think with Jack, one of the little, not things stick out, but he always talks about E plus R equals O. So E equals, anybody know what that is? E plus R, or put it on silent, E plus O?
I've heard of that before. I think it's got something to do with energy plus resilience equals outcome. How about that? Was that a good guess?
It was close. It was event plus response equals outcome. And that is basically, if anything happens, so we're going through life and to every day, there's always these little events that happen, and how you respond to them will determine the outcome. So if you're grumpy, you'll have a negative ripple. If you're positive and energized around that, you'll probably get a better outcome. But life's just full of those little moments, isn't it? So if we make sure that our response is the best version that we can create in that moment, then it's likely that the outcome will be more positive too. And the consolidation of all those little moments will lead to, I guess, how successful you are in life, or how happy a family you have, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember bumping into Jack Canfield at the National Speaking Convention in New Orleans, and I was with Simon Succi, our friend, and Simon's really up front, and he said, there's Jack Canfield over there, I'm going to go and talk to him. Are you coming? And I sort of hesitated for a minute, and he was off, whoosh. So we went up to him, and he'd obviously had a few bottles of wine at that point, and we said, Jack, how did you do it writing Chicken Soup for the Soul? And he told me he'd been rejected 62 times. I think the number probably changes every time somebody asks him that question. And then I said, well, how did you and Mark Victor Hansen actually write it? And he said, Derek, we went away for 2 days and we had 6 bottles of wine the first night, and about 3 o'clock in the morning we suddenly had this crazy idea of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I went, is that how you do it? He said, yeah. I said, I think I better get some wine in when I get back to the UK. And at that point he went up in the lift, and I think he probably fell over, but he was a school teacher, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a school teacher, and then they started set the business up, and they started talking around schools and then conferences, and built up this idea. People started sharing stories at these events, and they decided to put these stories into a book. But that kind of philosophy had never been seen before. No one had really done that, and there was no genre then called self-development. But he was fun. We actually, when I got my book published, we approached his agent because we thought, well, if he managed to get a deal, and I was slightly embarrassed on the show because I got a deal within 3 weeks, which is one of the benefits of the show. So it was slightly embarrassing, but because my book's only sold a fraction of that, so maybe I needed a few rejections first to improve it.
Yeah, no. So who else have you had on the show, and what can we learn from them? Oh
my word, I think I've had loads of people. One of the people I've really enjoyed is Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, and I've interviewed Ivan a couple of times before, and Ivan very kindly wrote the foreword to my book. And one of the things I remember with Ivan is he asked him about success, and he said, well, we did a bit of research into this. We researched about 80 people about half of them are really successful, and about half who we deemed weren't. I don't know how you made the cut between the two. And we realized that everybody really understood the principles of success. However, what we concluded was that the really successful people were those who we're prepared to get the things done that the less successful people weren't. So it was about, I guess, going that extra mile, picking the phone up, all those sorts of things. It was actually the kind of doing those, being prepared to do those tasks that others weren't. But he was, what I liked about him, and I think I also really, there was a gentleman called Marshall Thurber, whose son, I've forgotten his first name, but he's a big movie producer. Marshall, very successful man, lawyer and attorney, and coach to Tony Robbins, I believe. The thing they had in common, I remember with Marshall at the end of an interview, he spent half an hour asking me questions, and I felt really special, that this guy who was so successful, I think he had 7 homes around the world, which a few more than I have, obviously. But he was really, really engaging, and he just kept asking me questions, and I felt really special. And at the end of that conversation, a little like Ivan had done with me, I asked him, what's the most important thing when it comes to success in business and life, from your perspective? And he said, it's this. He said, Chris, be more interested than interesting. And I found that I've thought about that a lot, and Ivan did that too. Ivan spent 45 minutes with me on one call, just finding out about me, seeing how he could help me, and he adopted the same principle. And I think if we were all more, everybody was more interested in other people than just trying to show how great they are, I think that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. And I think that doesn't that come originally from Dale Carnegie, How to Influence and Influence People?
Yeah.
Although,
absolutely, yeah, it's got it there. It comes from there. Yeah, you
can't help thinking it came from Socrates and Plato and some of the other greatest people in the world, can you? Because that's the magic of really high achieving leaders, isn't it? The people that have got that charisma. And Will Kintish's show, who's on somewhere, I think he's on today, and I've discussed that a lot. We have discussed it here on Monday night as well, and it's really important to ask those questions. Who else, Chris? Who else comes to mind? I know there was so many people.
Yeah, I mean, I've met all sorts of people. I'm just going through. I've got a few little books here, actually. This one, Dan Rome, was very interesting. Draw to Win. That's quite a good little book. It's about he's hugely successful. He draws pictures, and when he does business pitches, it's all in drawings. And what Dan did was he drew a series of pictures to help explain Obamacare. And suddenly, out of nowhere, he gets a phone call from the White House saying, "Can you come?" Could you come to the White House and explain Obamacare to us? And eventually what he did was a series of pictures, which was extended across the states and hit the media to explain Obamacare in pictures. And sometimes I think the pictures say 1,000 words. So that's a nice little thing to kind of think about. I love this guy. He's really good friend of mine, David Fox-Pitt, Positive Veracity. David is the most positive guy I've ever met. He's raised 40 million for charity, and he puts on extreme events in Scotland and about to do one in Barbados, I think, and I competed in his quadrathlon a couple of years ago and did a full day as a result of being inspired by David, and swam across Loch Tay and then ran over 15 Monroes, so 7 Monroes, 7-mile kayak, 37-mile hilly bike ride. So if he could get me to do that, he's got to be some positive guy. So he's really impressive. Other places, I was thinking, I interviewed a guy called Dr. Mansour Malik, and Mansour he created something called the International Diplomatic Business Club, and he's of Pakistani origin. He lives in Dubai now, and he created some groups which extended to a membership of 3,000 with ambassadors, senior members of royal families, and senior business people, and gain an award from the Queen for doing that. And one of the things he really talks about is about the importance of love. And I don't think I've had a radio interview where I've had so many messages from around the world. And it surprised me because he's very spiritual. He's quite a religious man. He's got a strong accent, and I wasn't really sure how this interview would come across. But as a a consequence of that, I ended up going out to Turkey. He invited me out to Turkey, to Konya, and invited me to experience the Rumi celebrations. If you're familiar with the old sort of prophet and wise fella called Rumi from the 13th century, and I found myself sitting with ambassadors and watching the whirling dervishes do their ceremony, and I got to interview the head of the whirling dervishes and some spiritual leaders, and found myself on TV, and that was really thought-provoking actually for me. In fact, one of the things that I do believe that we can learn a lot from wisdom, and you mentioned Aristotle back there. And one of the things that struck me was, and has been a theme, because you pick up themes from people, is that there's a need for us to be more caring and thoughtful and kind in business and in life, really, and if we're going to bring people together. And what surprised me was the hotel that I stayed in Konya, which was a Novotel. Was I interviewed the hotel manager because they run their business based upon Rumi principles. Are you familiar with with Rumi?
No, I think you better. Well, I'm not, so there's a chance one or two others are.
So Rumi, if you Google Rumi, R-U-M-I, you'll discover that, I think it was a couple of years ago, Rumi's poetry was the #1 selling poetry in the United States. There's also places like in Iran, Rumi is huge, and Rumi wrote a lot of kind of poetry and prose which is inspiring people. I'm trying to think which of the big businesses. There's a really famous big business that was inspired by Rumi, and some lovely quotes. And I'll share a poem actually. So this poem, I discovered this was written on each line. There's 7 lines to this poem, and each line was on a different room in this hotel I stayed at in Konya, because they run their hotel based around this poem. And I got the most amazing customer service in this hotel. They just looked after me like a crown prince. It was unbelievable. And this poem, and I could maybe send this to you, Derek, it goes like this. In compassion and grace, be like the sun. In concealing others' faults, be like the night. In generosity and helping others, be like a river. And this hotel was absolutely like a river with its generosity. In anger and fury, be like the dead. In modesty and humility, be like the earth. In tolerance, be like the sea. Either appear as you are or be as you appear. And I sort of remind myself of that poem sometimes, because I think there's some really lovely principles in there about life and living, and I think we do need to return a little bit back to realizing what's important.
Absolutely, Chris. And if you send that to me, I'll put it as an attachment to next week's briefing, so anyone can get that if they want to. Chris, I know you've had Will Kintish and me on your show. You haven't mentioned us. Clearly, we were quite a long way down the batting order of people that provided you with information.
Well, I've got a story about you, Derek.
Oh no, Chris.
I got somebody called me up after our interview, the first one that we did, because Derek's been on the show twice, and said, what a wonderful man, and what a really interesting show that was. And that person was my mother.
I thought I was going to get embarrassed for a minute there, but it was your mum. That's
my mum. She really enjoyed that one.
Oh, good. Well, good on your mum, Chris. Good on your mum, Chris. Now I know you're a philanthropist. You set high goals. You want to give as much knowledge and wisdom away to 1 million people, and I think you've achieved that goal through your radio show. But you've got a road in Leicester named after you. What was that all about?
Well, one of the opportunities that I had, it actually came through the show. I had a client called Everard's Brewery for many years. I think I probably worked on and off with Everard's for maybe 15 or 16 years. And I interviewed the wonderful managing director, Stephen. And I do some work around purpose with companies and business leaders, and I did this process with him and helped him understand his purpose. And what I really love through the journey that I've been with them has been how some of the things I've done with them has had an impact. And I interviewed Stephen on the show. There's a recent interview with Stephen Gould, that's Stephen with a P, around Everard's Meadows, and you might want to have a listen to it because it's quite inspiring. And what I did with Stephen was I interviewed him, and he said after the show, he said, "Chris, tell me about business elevation. I like that concept." And we hadn't maybe worked for a couple of years. And I went over, he invited me to go to his house, which I thought was a bit strange. And they got this secret project, and it was their biggest elevation project in their history. And they've been going since 1849. And basically what Everards have done, and they asked me if I would be involved with leading this project, was they had a brewery, a large brewery, which was providing a drink for a lot of other companies, but not at very high margins. But this site was part of a 12 million visited shopping complex, and the shopping complex wanted to buy the site, but they happened to own 90 acres across the road, with about 70 acres of that being floodplain. And what they've done is they built a new visitor centre and brewery, craft brewery, but created an amazing centre with a lovely cycle facility and cycle routes. They've opened up 70 acres of land for local people to be able to enjoy, and it's really thriving now. Lovely coffee shop. There's other things happening there as well. And they've given that out 70 acres across the community, and it connects up with the Sustrans cycle route via a bridge that they built. And they've just spent £250,000 around kind of regeneration and improving trees and all that sort of thing. And it's just a lovely example, I think, of giving back and engaging the community in a vision. And I was heavily involved in that. And it's there's a road there which is called Cooper Way, and I believe that that Cooper was a little nod to myself, and also, of course, Cooper's made barrel rings as well, so it fitted really nicely. So I'm very proud of that, actually.
I think you're being a bit modest there. It obviously was named after you. We're nearly coming to the end of the formal part of the interview, so any questions for Chris, please put them in the chat box. But before we do that, Chris, let me fire a few questions that we got in the chat box. The first one's from Nigel. Chris, did you use any data science techniques when assessing pricing?
Oh my word, data science techniques. Gosh, data science.
Sounds like the answer to that's no, then.
Well, of course, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about data science techniques. As I'm going back a little while since I was involved with all these contracts and things. We would just generally be, getting a sense of. I mean, but we probably did, with things like utility pricing and gas and those utilities. They were a little bit more complex, predicting when to buy in and when not. And we did get involved in sort of modelling and things like that. And each sector that I kind of ran, we always had a strategy, and we did a market research piece on every single category. And we did the same when we were buying we bought for people like Scottish and Newcastle. We reviewed all of their costs and saved them about £10 million, and Pizza Express and Nando's. And we would use a combination of anything that was available to get a sense around price, but also a lot of price benchmarking versus deals we'd done before as well, I would imagine. I don't know if that answers the question. I maybe ought to ask what that gentleman's perception of what data science is about.
Yeah, we can do that later, Chris. There's another question in the Gabrielle, who has done some NLP work with us, and she says there is a field of right and wrong, and she will see you in the field beyond, Chris. I think that's I think that's a compliment for
a lovely one.
What I used to call the wacky.
That's a Rumi quote, I think.
Is that a Rumi quote? Oh, there you go. From Godfrey, he says, when you were 28, you sent personal goals. How young were you when you first decided what contribution you wanted to make to the world?
I think for me, I mean, I was brought up in Scunthorpe. I was expected to be follow the family and be a steel worker. So I guess, for me, my horizons kind of gradually developed. I knew there was something inside me that didn't want to do what my dad did, and it's a particular story where we happened to meet the CEO of British Steel, and he asked me at an open evening if I wanted to go and work there when I was older, and I said, "You must be joking." And my dad yelled at me all the way home and said, "You might want to work there one day." And it came out of me. I just said, "But Dad, you're not happy there. Why would I want to work there?" And I think that was the first little moment when I realized that I didn't want to stay in Scunthorpe, and there was maybe more for me. And I guess, you know, from going on a placement year and going to university, and remember my first placement year, they had to have a chat with me. I was down in London because no one understood me because I was so northern. My horizons merged, but it was only at the age of 28, and I was working for Mars then, that I did a program called Landmark, and a friend recommended Landmark to me at the training director at Mars. And I did this program, and it just transformed everything for me, actually. 3 days, and I came out of it, you know, with much more confidence. And so many little things happened during those 3 days that is, as they say, it's a significant landmark in many people's life. And for me, it was. And it was coming out of that I sat in this room feeling, before I felt a little sorry for myself. I think my girlfriend at the time had just cheated with the managing director, and we'd said goodbye. I'm pleased we didn't get never married, but it was, I was feeling a bit sorry down in the dumps, and I just got this piece of paper, and I just decided to write down what life would be like at 40, and everything from that moment started to improve.
What's really interesting about goal setting is the real trick is to write it down, isn't it? And a lot of people don't get that, but you have to write it down and keep looking at them. Chris, before we close, I can't resist this, and some people will understand where I'm coming from. You've come with me to watch Arsenal. Martin Cairns, a Leicester City supporter, has come with me to watch Arsenal. In those days, we beat you. But something's magic has happened to transform Leicester City, and I wondered what leadership it was that's changed it. For those of you who don't know, Leicester City is a team that's been punching above their weight for about 6 years. Won the Premiership 6 years ago when no one said they could. In fact, they were about 5,000 to 1 with the bookies at the beginning of the season. What can we learn from Leicester City?
Well, I think what you can learn, I think there is some real wisdom tied up in the sort of Buddhist philosophy that the family kind of possess, and they are generous to their fans. They will lead into decisions. I felt that when Ranieri went, that was a tough call they made to get rid of him. But what they've done is they've created this culture. You know, it sounds to me, from everything I hear, and I have been in there and had meetings, that they have created this culture, this philosophy that people buy into. It's a very supportive, nurturing, but high performing culture, and they're prepared to invest. So they just invested 100 million in a training center. But I think it's this combination. You know, for me, engagement is something I'm passionate about. You know, my dad hated his work, and I thought that was sad after 40 years, or the environment anyway, not the people. And I think what they've done is they've this philosophy, this coaching philosophy, this caring, being ambitious, but bringing everybody along with you. You know, giving a little bit of time to kind of develop, but it's and believing in, you know, young people really as well. People, they haven't spent a huge amount of money, but they help them realize that they were capable of more, I think. And this team philosophy they have is really strong as well. So yeah, I'm as amazed as you are. I did go and watch us get beaten by you 2 or 3 years ago, and now it is lovely to be a part of this, and it was lovely to be a part of the winning year. I still keep pinching myself, and I'm missing being back in the stadium, really. It's very inspiring.
And they made some good decisions, and life is all about making good decisions as well, isn't it? Good decisions on the managers and good decisions on the players, as far as I can see. And there's some pretty crummy decisions made in football. Chris, we're coming to the end of the interview. Chris, how do people get in touch with you if they're interested in what you do, and how do they get your book?
Oh yeah, my book should be available on Amazon. That's my power to get things done, whether you feel like it or not. Which was written because at the time I realised I needed a bit of therapy because I was doing the things I like doing rather than things I needed to do to run a successful business. So that came from that. That should be available on Amazon. To get in touch, you can email me at chris@chriscooper.co.uk. You can join me on LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm not the most brilliant at using social media. My assistant's better than I am. But yeah, feel free to email me. chriscooper.co.uk is the website. I'm always happy to talk, connect, help. Yeah, let's... and it's exciting, I think, the next few years. It's what an opportunity we have now to improve things. So let's all look at ways that we can come together and contribute to a better world, I think.
Chris, fantastic. Thanks for joining the Monday Night Chat show. We'll get you back on at some stage. Will you stay on when I stop the recording to ask a few
no hurry.
other questions? So whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the podcast, thanks for joining me. I'm Derek Arden, and thanks to my guest tonight, Chris Cooper.